Hello viewers, thank you for joining me. My plans for the series I was going to review this month got a little delayed. Luckily, I've had a few movies and shorter series put aside precisely for an occasion like this one. Unfortunately, in hindsight, I probably wouldn't have chosen this one, so you can expect spoilers, and likely a fair bit of ranting too, as we go forward. Psychic School Wars opens with two major events. Kamakura Junior High bans the possession of all cell phones on school property the same day a strange new student transfers in. One of our main characters, Kenji, saw this new student, Ryoichi, on his walk that morning, and heard him musing about not being from Earth. Ryoichi doesn't have any real problems fitting in at their school, even if he does come across as a little odd, just being very out of touch with some aspects of regular life for a kid his age. But strange things keep happening at their school. A lot of students start missing school, and many of the ones who stay start exhibiting personality changes. Pretty soon, the student council has been completely taken over by these changed kids, with Ryoichi at the center of it all, and it's up to Kenji and two of his friends to try and stop them from taking over the school completely. Unfortunately, this is one of those movies that sounded a lot more interesting summarized like this than it actually was to watch. To me, it just felt like the focus was never where it should have been. In fact, despite all these supernatural shenanigans going on around them, most of the movie is spent on this love triangle with three of our main characters. There was Kenji, our main protagonist, who's kind of awkward and clumsy, but mostly just comes across as being very ordinary. He has a crush on this girl in his class named Kahori, who later develops a crush on Ryoichi. And on the other side of things is Natsuki, Kenji's childhood friend and neighbor who's had a crush on him pretty much their whole lives. But the four of them maintain a pretty comfortable friendship when they're not drowning themselves in teen angst. We also get quite a few scenes of the kids just hanging out, pondering philosophical questions. It's just very slow going, even once they reach the point where it feels like things should have picked up speed. Natsuki comes across Ryoichi awakening psychic powers in another student after school one day. When they try to do the same for her, they find that she's not one of the gifted ones. But nothing really comes of this. She just stops going to school for a little while. Kahori has a little more luck in solving the mystery. She's also found to have no special powers to awaken, but her crush on Ryoichi turns out not to be one-sided. Through almost offhand conversations he has with Kahori and Kenji, we learn that Ryoichi is from the future. In his time, what's left of humankind lives on the moon after Earth became uninhabitable. But they don't have the resources to sustain life on the moon long term, so Ryoichi's gone back in time to prevent Earth's destruction. Living on the moon awakens special abilities in some people. Abilities all humans have the potential to awaken, they've just never had the need for it with the current technology. That's where the cell phone plotline comes back in. I keep calling them psychic powers or abilities in general terms, but it's really just telepathy, being able to hear others' thoughts and communicate without speaking, which is why so many of the students have begun to act strangely. I got the feeling there was supposed to be some big underlying message about communication in this story, but it really didn't feel that way. It was set up reasonably well, but the follow-through just wasn't there. An unfortunate pattern in this movie as a whole. Like I said before, I feel like it sounds a lot better when watered down like this. The way these events actually play out in the movie is just boring, to put it frankly. It kept building up, but not taking off, like something dramatic would happen, a student being awakened or more of Ryoichi's mission or backstory being revealed, but then the kids would just go about their next days as usual like nothing had happened. But by far the most disappointing instance of this was what should have been the big climax of the movie. Natsuki's been hiding out in her room since her close-up encounter with these psychic awakening rituals. Once Kenji rescues Kahori from the consequences of failing her awakening, they go to see her. At this point, I was still hopeful things would finally pick up. The three band together and convince Natsuki to return to school, where she promptly gets in trouble with the student council, who've even got the teachers under their influence at this point, for having her cell phone with her. They hold this sort of disciplinary trial, and Natsuki starts on this big speech about how their telepathy actually discourages communication. But Kenji bursts in to help her and has his abilities unlocked. Ryoichi tells him this is something that was just meant to happen, the two of them being on opposite sides like this, and challenges him to a fight. There's this moment of silence, and then Kenji invites him to go hang out at the beach with them instead, like all the previous dramatic build-up never happened. I mean, I do get the point behind this. It had basically been implied at this point that Ryoichi doesn't actually want this mission to take over the Earth. It's what his father wanted, and it's a mission that's been passed down to him. And because Kenji's now been awakened himself, he can hear Ryoichi's true feelings and understands that he doesn't really want to fight, but it's just maybe not bad storytelling necessarily, but not interesting storytelling. They band together later to stand up to his father, and that conflict is equally brief and uninteresting. There are certain stories that are especially disappointing precisely because they had so much potential. There were a lot of things about Psychic School Wars that drew me in, but the way it was told turned it into the most boring movie about kids with psychic powers that I've ever seen. It's a serious exaggeration to even call what happened at their school a war. It was a very pretty movie, at least. Its one saving grace may have been that it was animated well. There was a lot of striking mystical imagery, but those scenes of other timelines never quite managed to tie back into the main story being told. Personally, I would skip this one if I were you. Thank you for watching.